Today I'm going to go outside the scope of Dr. Sarno's book a little bit and talk about my particular experience with my butt pain and back pain prior to coming across his book, because I think there's a couple of interesting things about my case that might be relevant to other people out there and that were not particularly addressed by Dr. Sarno's book. So, as I had mentioned, 7 years ago when I was sitting in the library studying for my exam, I experienced a sort of a soreness, or I also described it as an aching feeling in my left butt. And at the time, I had thought that it was like a bone problem. In fact, for all of the 7 years, I had pretty much thought that there was something structurally wrong with my bones in the butt area, because I had originally thought it was tied to the skating accident where I fell. And so from falling, after researching it online, I found that there's a bone in the butt area called the coccyx. It's the tailbone. And on the x-rays, even though overall the x-rays looked normal when I first took it 7 years ago, I did notice that the coccyx was sort of slightly bent at an angle that didn't seem quite normal to me. And so during this whole time I had thought that it was maybe a coccyx issue, and therefore that it was a bone issue. And so I sought out a lot of chiropractors to do some manipulation on the back, on the butt area in particular, to see if that would help. And so if you'll notice, over the course of my videos, I have been referring to the pain as sort of the butt pain and the back pain sort of interchangeably. But in fact, it's actually it was actually two different things, as I wanted to point out today. So originally the pain was in the butt, the left butt. And over about 1 or 2 years after the initial injury occurred, after seeing a lot of chiropractors, doctors who who were not really able to address the problem, I noticed that what I did was I sort of started to shift my position unconsciously. At the time it was unconscious, but later on I realized that it was what I did. Is that since the pain was in my left butt area, then I would always sort of sit slightly, on the right side, and I would develop the habit of putting one leg over the other, in particular the left leg over my right leg every time I was sitting, just to try to take some pressure off of the left side of the butt, thinking that putting pressure on the butt would aggravate the pain further. And so after doing this for about 1 or 2 years, I noticed that the butt pain had all but disappeared. But in its place, there was a new pain, and I would call that the back pain, which sort of the first time I felt that back pain was about a year after the butt pain had first appeared. And the back pain started as sort of one day I was lying in bed about ready to fall asleep at night, and I could feel all of a sudden that there was a sort of a pulsating feeling near what today I now know as the L4, L5 region. And so it was sort of like a pulsating feeling, as if there was blood flow, and something was sort of it was just pulsating and kind of moving against the nerves back there. And so the interesting thing is that by sort of shifting my position, and I don't know if it was physically caused, there was a physical cause, or if it was a mental thing, probably a combination of both. But over 1 or 2 years after the initial injury, the butt pain disappeared, and in its place, the back pain appeared. And initially, like I said, it was just a sort of a pulsing feeling in the lower vertebra, but eventually it got to the point where those joints just became very stiff. And it wasn't just the L4-5, it later on became the L3-4, and just my whole lower back area sort of became very stiff and very, it would hurt very much when I sat down. Or even when I was walking, like maybe, an hour or two, because before I would have no problem walking, but then eventually it got to the point where just walking would hurt my lower back. And so after 7 years, near the time when it really got bad and I started to really go intensively seek help, I actually came across one sort of therapy that my friend had introduced me to, and that is the Feldenkrais method. And I remember I went to take maybe 2 lessons from a Feldenkrais practitioner in my area. And altogether, I could say that the Feldenkrais actually was the first thing that I had found useful after 7 years of searching for a good therapy. The Feldenkrais was the first thing that I noticed really changed the way I perceived the pain in a very fundamental way. And even though it wasn't the ultimate cure for my pain, that was due to Dr. Sarno's book, but the Feldenkrais I felt was sort of a very important bridge for me mentally to go from thinking of the pain as a physical problem to ultimately realizing that it was a completely 100% psychological problem. Now, if you're not familiar with Feldenkrais, basically what they do is, when I saw the practitioner, she had me lie on a sort of lie on a table, and she would manipulate my body, not just the back area, but my arms and other areas of my body, in a certain way that the body wasn't actually used to. And so for example, if I had developed a habit of my arm moving my arm left, then she would sort of move it right, and she would sort of feel the habits of my body simply by, because she was trained to do so. She would move it certain ways and thereby figure out the routine, and she would move it the opposite way and sort of extend the range of motion beyond what the body is used to. At least that's sort of how I understand what they were doing from a layman's perspective. And I think the objective of what they were trying to accomplish with the Feldenkrais method was to teach the brain that there are alternative mappings that could be possible between certain movements that the brain thinks of and the way that the movement is actually expressed in the body. I guess that sounds a little bit theoretical, but maybe if we go into I read a little bit online about what the Feldenkrais, how the Feldenkrais method originated, and originally it was this guy named Feldenkrais who had sort of a knee injury, and there was an actual physical injury, if I recall, in his knee where I think there were ligaments torn or something to that effect, and he had developed a sort of a compensation mechanism in his walking or in his movements basically that tried to shift the pain away from the ligament. So if he were to exert natural pressure as he was usually used to doing on that knee, then that would cause a lot of pain. And so how his body compensated was to maybe shift his weight or to basically adjust the posture in a way such that a lot of the weight would be transferred away from the injured body part. But in so doing, you sort of run into other issues where, if you're putting too much weight on the other knee, then your other leg is going to run into problems. And so what Feldenkrais method does is it sort of makes your body more aware of any sort of compensation mechanisms that it's engaging in. And once your body, and I guess it's a mind-body thing. So once your mind and body become aware of the intentional actions that you are doing, which are inadvertently leading to other kinds of pain, then you are in a better position to be able to stop doing those things. And I guess you can probably see where I'm going with this now, is that I realized in seeking help for my lower back pain, after my second Feldenkrais session, I remember I was, after the session itself, it really feels like your body as whole is just like jello, and you have sort of lost any sense of, you have to sort of relearn how to walk and do some very basic things, simply because the habitual connection between your mind and your body has sort of been temporarily severed by this Feldenkrais manipulation. But so I remember after the second session, I was sitting in my living room talking to my brother about my back pain. And I noticed all of a sudden that, my goodness, I was very, very heavily leaning to my right. And it was thanks to the Feldenkrais method that had pointed this out to me, that had made me realize that this is what I was doing. And so starting from that point, after my second Feldenkrais session, I sort of re-centered my posture to avoid putting so much weight on my back. And now, after the problem has been solved, after having gone through this process, I can say that this is my intuitive feel of what was happening to my body at the time, was that due to my original butt pain 7 years ago, I started shifting my weight to the right, which caused a sort of a torsion, a twisting action on my vertebra, which actually caused the discs in the L4-5 area to start to bulge due to the torsion that I was introducing. And after 7 years, the twisting had just become so great, had accumulated to such an extent that the bulging was actually noticeable on the MRIs by that time, after 7 years. And so when I went around to see the doctors after 7 years, everybody was saying, okay, well, you look, you have a bulging disc, but nobody had really made the connection between how I was shifting my body, and which I think led to the disc bulge being so pronounced after 7 years. Now, keep in mind that this is not a scientific study or a scientific explanation in any way. It's simply my intuitive feeling of what really happened to my own body after all these years. And so how did that help me to realize that? Was once I started to adjust my posture back to the center to avoid shifting to the right, the most amazing thing happened, which is the butt pain, which had disappeared after 1 or 2 years in the beginning of the process, reappeared after 5 years. So near the end of the 7 years, near the last 3 months or so, the butt pain reappeared with a vengeance, simply because I had started putting weight on my left side again. And I don't know if it was a physical reason that caused the weight shift to actually put pressure on the piriformis muscle. I don't know if it's a physical reason or if it was actually a mental thing where the mind was behind all of these things, like, it was concocting a sort of a false posture to address the pain, and then once I recorrected, the mind was causing another. I don't know if that was the real nature of the process, but what I did know was that after readjusting my position back to center, it stopped the back pain from getting worse in terms of I believe it stopped twisting the spine, and I felt that the twisting feeling was much relieved by this posture adjustment. However, as I said, the butt pain came back, and all of my attention then became focused on how I could deal with solving the butt pain, as opposed to solving this back pain issue, which was a very complicated and messy feeling down there in the back when I was experiencing it. I was really glad at that point to to actually have isolated the problem to the butt, because the butt was sort of like a aching, piercing feeling, but the back was a much more difficult problem to deal with, I felt back then. And so it was in the process of searching for a cure to just the butt pain, the piriformis pain, that I went online, and eventually I was looking for, at first I was looking for information on piriformis release surgery, which is where they would cut the piriformis muscle to see if that would stop the butt pain. But in doing so, I came across Dr. Sarno's book, and as you know, the rest is history, because once I read the book, then I immediately targeted that piriformis pain with the exercises that he suggested, the mental exercises, and within 2 or 3 weeks it was gone. To give you an update, like I said, I read the book earlier this year in around February or so, and by March I had undergone the 95% recovery I was talking about, and now it's July, and for 4 months I have actually forgotten that I actually had a back pain problem for 7 years. And the only reason that I'm making these videos now is because I had a doctor friend who I was chatting with a few weeks ago, who I had sort of confided in regarding a lot of my back problems, and he was very helpful to me, giving me counsel about just the pain I was going through. And he actually asked me about how was my back pain recently, and I said, you know what, that's a good question, because I totally have forgotten that that I had even had this back pain problem. Like, I go run, I play basketball, I sit on the plane for many hours, I drive everywhere now, and I had basically forgotten that I actually had this problem, much to the amazement of myself and all of the other friends, all of my close friends around me who had known me over these 7 years. And so I can sit here today and, as a living testament to the efficacy of Dr. Sarno's techniques. And so I hope that this video has also perhaps given some people some insight into how maybe some of the pains in their body might work, just to suggest maybe possible directions for you to explore to potentially deal with your own back pain successfully.